Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, episode 46, Ben and Cybertopia. I'm here today talking with Ben. Hi, Ben.
Hello.
We're going to talk about your game Cybertopia in a little bit, but first I wanted to hear about who has Ben outside of RPGs.
Oh, outside of RPGs. Okay. So, I come from a background in video games. I am a video game analyst, which means I study like behavioral data of people who play computer games.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So that's my day job. I'm also a father and a husband and general family stuff. I live in Scotland, which at the moment is quite damp and cold. We do not get good autumns or fall over here. Or winter, or really any time of year. It's just windy and wet.
Well, uh, nothing to add there.
I'm complaining about this, but like you just had hurricanes over in the States lately, so
Well,
yeah.
I'm in California, so here it's like
Oh, you're
today
fine
it
then.
was 95 degrees or something like that. And well, yeah, I guess I should translate that for you.
And that's generally too hot. That's
Yeah,
like
the
30 odd degrees, right?
35. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm, yeah, that's too much.
Yeah, but it's starting to cool down. We had some rain like a few weeks ago, so I'm looking forward to the weather that you're experiencing. But yes, reminded of that Douglas Adams character in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where it was raining wherever he was, because he was
Mm,
actually a rain god, so like the rain was following him.
that would really suck, eh?
Yeah. There's one time where he like goes on a vacation to like some tropical island, and then there's like some freak storm that day in the middle of summer. But it's
Oh
because the
god.
rain is following him wherever he is. So, all right, well, cool. So you said video game analyst. Is that like sort of like the gamification, like trying to increase like playtime kind of stuff?
Yeah, some of it comes into that. I try to focus more on just finding out what players actually enjoy or don't enjoy, or like where they're getting stuck and that sort of things in games.
Hmm.
There's always an element, especially from the higher ups, to push for like greater monetization and longer session lengths and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, you got to balance it, right? Like I've been in the industry for over 10 years now, and I've seen so many projects where they've like really chased the dollar, and it's like, nah, just try and make a good game that is fun, and the dollar will follow.
It's probably like quarterly focus, where yeah, that could increase something in a quarter, but it's gonna damage your long-term returns
Yeah,
from
the
a
corporate
financial
approach really
perspective.
just doesn't work.
Yeah. Uh, well, good
Yeah,
that you're
and
sort of
it's
insulated
a
from that if you
sucky
can be.
industry to be in at the moment, especially like as someone in the RPG space as well. I'm both my hobbies and my work are in like just not great industries at the moment.
Yeah. Um, well, I think for like are you talking about like the D&D Beyond thing that happened recently?
There's a lot of shit going on in this industry in general, right? But
Yeah,
yeah, particularly around Hasbro and WATC.
yeah. Well, I actually think it's somewhat good for the hobby that it's sort of scaring like more enthusiasts away from D&D and spreading out
Mm.
to other systems. So it's actually encouraging variety and sort of breaking that quasi monopoly that D&D has on RPGs.
That's that's a very glass half full way to look at it. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. I'm British, so I'm just an eternal cynic, you know.
Okay, yes. Um, are you British or are you? I guess
Yeah,
you.
so I live in Scotland. I'm actually from London,
Oh, okay,
but
gotcha.
yeah, I've got family around the world as well, so I've got a bit of a weird accent.
Okay, yeah, gotcha. Well, yeah. What got you started on playing RPGs?
Um, I don't really know. I think it was one of these things that I was always interested in. But I just never took that plunge until like my late 20s. And I know a lot of people who started in like high school and stuff. I just like I never quite got there. And I always wonder like what I'd be like now if I had started when I was like 13 or 14 or something and been playing all this time with like AD&D or whatever was back then.
Hmm.
Um And then like I made some friends later in my 20s, and they were also kind of nerdy, and we all talked about for a while, let's play some D&D, and we tried to find a group and didn't actually end up finding a group. Eventually one of us just got the D&D starter set, and none of us knew how to play or really even what DMing was or anything really. We'd seen like, I think this is around the time that Big Bang Theory was getting popular, and they had some D&D in that, and then Stranger Things came along. So we were like, okay, I just took the reins and DM'd through the
Which starter
Fandelver.
set was this?
The mine's a Fandelver one.
Okay, so the 5th edition one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was a struggle. We didn't have all of the materials that I think we probably should have had, and none of us had any experience. So we had a fun time with it because it was just silly and like sitting around a table. This is before the pandemic days, so we were all like actually meeting up in person and stuff.
Yes, that's so nice.
and like we'd spent so long. We like a session that I think now I'd probably run in about 2-3 hours took us like 6 or 8 hours, and we'd be messing around and having food and stuff in between and that. But
yeah.
like it was like a proper event doing that stuff. And then of course, like a few years later, the pandemic comes along, and I transitioned into online playing, and everything has just kind of exploded since then.
Yeah.
It's taken over my life.
Well, yeah, I can tell from your itch shop, itch.io.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you got a lot of cool stuff there. Well, we'll get to that.
Yep.
Yeah, I was thinking what you said about like taking breaks in the middle of the sessions. Like when I played in person, we would do that. That was back when I was a kid. So the break would be to go in the backyard and hit each other with sticks. But...
I mean, when you're playing for like 8 hours, at some point in that time, you have to stop for food, and just eating like chips and whatever is not going to sustain you through that whole period.
Yeah. No, you need to. I remember like when we were playing in person, we would just like, okay, we're gonna go get a drink. Let's everybody get up and go to the kitchen to get drinks, just to like, stretch.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So did you start off as a DM for that initial playing?
Yeah. I think like towards the end, we swapped over. One of the other guys took over. I didn't like his DMing though, so I took the reins back. I think I quite quickly realized I have control issues.
I really like that aspect of DMing, like having control, and not necessarily like in a session, but like outside of a session. Because like outside of a session as a player, there's not really much you can do like in your head thinking about what you're gonna do next time, because it's sort of dependent on everything else. But as a DM, like there's so many other like cogs and wheels that I have to track and spin and make sure it's working, that I feel like I have a lot of brainstorming I can do outside of a session that is actually like
I think
progress.
Also, part of it is that like, and I've not had this so much with more experienced DMs and GMs that I've played with over the last few years, but like sometimes I'm playing with someone and they're running it, and I'm just like, I wouldn't run it like that, or I wouldn't do it that way. And I don't say anything. I'm not going to say anything, but in my head I'm thinking, and that's not the most pleasant of feelings. But like since I've had some amazing GMs, and it's been really great when you find a group or when you find a DM that like just really runs something well. That feels so good.
Yeah. I get that, and I feel like a lot of times I when I think about it logically, like for other people where I would do this my way, I also think like I'd probably be making different mistakes than they're making.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even with the games that I've designed myself, I still make mistakes, and I have to go and look up the book, or someone corrects me, and I'm like, really? Oh, I did not remember that part of the rule or something that I wrote.
Oh man, there's so many examples of that where like usually when you're writing something, like you're very deep into like reading it, rereading it when you're producing it, but then after that it's just sort of gone, and you don't bother with that content anymore, compared to other people that read your work and then read it again a year later and then again a year later, and they kind of have a better understanding of it in its complete form because you were kind of reading through it on its way there.
It's the whole like forest for the trees sort of thing, right?
Yeah, but I mean, for big fandoms like George R.R. Martin for the Game of Thrones stuff, like he's not the person that knows the most about Game of
Oh
Thrones
God,
at
no.
this
Yeah,
point. That's
right.
why he has like the forums are almost like helping him remember all the stuff that he's writing about. Um, so yeah, I think he has a few like really knowledgeable people that he actually like calls them and to check on stuff. Like, hey, what was this character doing then? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was just curious about your transition into making your own games. Like you've made that
Mm.
pretty quickly compared to a lot of other people I see that go into making their own games comparatively.
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, so like, my whole first group had never played any of these sorts of TTRPGs of any kind before. And yeah, we got through the Fandelver set and it was fine. We had a good time and that. But I think there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm to continue after that. And I think part of the problem was that it was just a little bit too crunchy for everyone, particularly as like first timers on RPGs.
Mhm.
Um, that everyone kind of bounced off it a little bit. Like we played through and everyone had a good time. After that, we played a couple of little one shots of just random rules light kind of stuff, and they flowed really well, and everyone really got into it. And I tried another couple of campaigns for different things. We did one, a Sins RPG one, which was also quite crunchy, but that was like a post-apocalyptic, somewhat zombie-ish sort of thing.
Mhm.
Really fun, really great setting. But um, again, the guys bounced off of that after a little while, and I realized that we needed something that was just super simple that we could really just play along with, and the rules kind of built themselves. So I figured keep it as stripped bare as possible. And I wasn't on the scene at all at this point. I hadn't really played a lot of different systems. I wasn't aware of a lot of things. So I just came up with this idea of like we'll just roll a d20 and we'll make up some stats or something that we can add to it, and we'll make it all kind of just make it up as you go along, sort of thing. So I ended up just kind of naturally going down the narrative first route, or the fiction first route, which I didn't even know was a phrase at that point.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
uh, I tried to come up with a setting that everyone would be kind of comfortable with, but wouldn't be too entrenched in like the history of Tolkien or Game of Thrones or any of that sort of stuff. So I said, look, oh, we go near future, cyberpunk-ish. Everyone was kind of a bit into anime, so we went along to that sort of direction.
Something that's still like familiar to you and
Yeah,
your
right.
players,
And
but not like set in
mhm,
stone as much, where you can still have freedom to move and put places things where you want.
yeah, and the whole idea of it was that it's not too far into the distant future, so you're still thinking of things in terms of kind of modern, uh, kind of you can imagine it really happening sort of stuff.
Hmm.
And I tried to extrapolate like a world that in 30 years' time, what it might look like. Um, and I've probably actually gone much more hopeful than has worked out in that last, I don't
I
know,
did
six,
see
7 years.
that in your description for the survey that your setting is more like a post-scarcity setting instead of like the sort of
Mhm.
corporate doom thing that a lot of cyberpunk goes for.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I don't know. I guess I didn't want to go too doom and gloom. I wanted the focus to really be on the characters rather than like some big scary world that you're like fighting against the whole world or anything like that. And I just tried to make it as easy as possible and as comfortable as possible for everyone to get into. And everyone really enjoyed it. And I played it with people from work that had never played these sorts of games before. And um, then, of course, the pandemic came along pretty much immediately after I started making this, and we just played it online. And every week or so, I'd put out a shout out into the big work chat and be like, "Hey, who wants to play an RPG tonight? Give me a shout." And I got a different group every week. People who had never played before, people who had never played together before, some people that didn't even know each other, and it was great. And it worked so well that I was like, oh, maybe I'll kind of formalize this into a proper rule set and maybe even publish it. And it kind of went from there. And I made other systems based on the same framework, and then realized like, oh, maybe I could sell this, or someone suggested maybe you stick this on drive through. which I did, but then the drive-through crowd really did not like it. I got some quite unpleasant comments and stuff.
Oh, I'm kind
Uh,
of surprised by that,
and
but that's too bad.
yeah, um, I probably a bit of my inexperience came through there of like I didn't know what price point to use and how to really like advertise it, and it wasn't laid out professionally or anything like that. So
Well, I guess my point is with being surprised by that is that I feel like on drive-through, I wouldn't expect negative attention. I would just expect maybe no attention.
oh yeah, it wasn't a huge amount, but the attention that I did get was not good.
Mm,
Though like the people that I knew and the people that I'd run it for and stuff had really enjoyed it, and some of them had even paid for it themselves when I'd put it up for sale.
uh,
The general public was not so forgiving, but yeah, I then took it away, did some more work on it, and expanded and got involved in the community more to find out like how is this particular aspect of this done, and learning a bit about layout and getting in touch with illustrators and stuff like that. Um, just kind of found a corner of the scene, particularly in the UK and the and Europe. There's there's a few kind of groups where you can join, like Discord groups and stuff, and super supportive, super helpful, and really helped me find my place, and then kind of explore further and go into like the social media scene of it, and like the rise and fall of TTRPG Twitter and stuff like that. And
right.
there's so many people out there that have been really friendly about it and stuff. And like I think particularly on the indie side of TTRPG design, there's just been there's so much support because everyone's kind of in the same boat of no one will play our games, no one will look at our stuff, but we all love each other and we all love the stuff that we all make. So
Yes,
there's a nice circle there.
yes, you have to assume that the audience that you're making the game for is kind of they're in front of you and not necessarily much wider than that. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, it's still a fun experience.
And like I guess though it has somewhat fragmented over the last couple of years, especially, like there's a lot of that scene still there, and there's a lot of the people that I got to know and made friends with early on still around, and I still bump into them. And now I'm going to conventions and stuff, and I'm seeing people there that I've known for years on Twitter, and
Uh-huh.
it's so nice to have that kind of community.
Yeah. You could have your own table at one of these conventions. You've got a bunch of stuff you've published.
Yeah, I've been considering it. It feels like a lot of work. What I generally do is I'll go and run games there,
Uh,
and I do that, and that's a lot of fun and a lot less pressure, I think, than like thinking, oh, I've got to break even. Like,
yeah, I think another portion of like tabling at a convention is that then you, then it's work. Like you don't
right.
get to walk around as much. You have to be
Mm,
at the desk and talking to people and like
yeah.
you got to be eyes up. You can't have your nose in a book while you're waiting for someone to show up because then you look like you're unapproachable.
And you don't
Um,
get to play anything. Like, I like to go and I'll run a couple of games, but
yeah.
then I'll go, like, in the last one, I was at Tabletop Scotland like a month ago, and that's in Edinburgh where I live, which was great. And so I ran Cybertopia, and then I ran my other games, Overgrown, and on the other like sessions, I played Tales from the Loop and Call of Cthulhu, and I've never got to play those games before, and I would love them. It was a great time. But if you're at a table the whole time, you don't get to play, you don't get to run, you're just trying to sell your wares, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I know some people, well, if you have a bigger team, right, you can sort of
Mm.
swap out or you can shut it down for like 3 hours while you go look around, but then you kind of have to like just kind of leave your stuff there,
Hmm.
which has its own like problems.
Yeah.
Hope, hopefully not, but you never know.
Yeah.
Um, well, you can only hope that your rule system is good enough to steal.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a bunch of stuff going around lately about pirating, and people feeling like I don't actually mind if people pirate my stuff because like they probably weren't going to pay for it anyway, and if they're playing it, then that's great. I don't mind.
Mhm.
And to be fair, most of my stuff I have like either free or lots of community copies available anyway. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think the community copy thing. for itch.io is a cool concept. I wish drive-through
Hmm.
did that as well. It's a nice thing to do. It's like, yeah, then you can get
Yeah.
you can get a community built, and then they can like play games with each
Hmm.
other, and then advertise beyond that.
It's another thing that kind of bounced me off of drive-through of like it just felt so rigid. Like the things you can do with the pages and the things you can do with the like levels of rewards and stuff, just they aren't there.
Yeah, I think the closest thing is you could have like a separate like demo product.
Hmm. But I don't know. Maybe one day I'll go back there. Like there is definitely an audience that I'm missing out on by not being on there anymore.
It does
So
seem like it's more
maybe one day.
popular because it's like sort of
It's
better.
so focused, right? Like
Yeah, it's
itch
more.
is good, but people don't go browsing itch for games. Like they go to itch because they know that there's a game there that they want.
Hmm. Yeah, I was also thinking like that drive-through is just sort of a better presentation for the most part. Like I think your presentation is actually really good, but that's because you put work into it
Hmm.
to make it look good. Drive-through, you can just slap something up there, and you don't have to do anything to make it look
Yeah,
nice.
it's all standardized and like it's just a page with text and maybe some pictures. That's it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I was curious more about the rules system for Cybertopia, the one we're talking about, not Overgrown
Hmm.
or any of the other ones. So it's just roll d20, so it's like a d20 offshoot for the system. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's literally just one d20. Like people ask me, "Oh, what dice do I need for it?" I'm just like a d20, and they're like, "How many?" One, just one.
All right. So is it? Well, you said it was like narrative focused. Or are you doing that like
Mm.
partial, like failure, partial success, like full success kind of system?
So I like to categorize it into three different types of roles. Basically, you have a role that will like happen. So if you're trying to do something like I don't know, cross the street, right? Maybe it's a busy street or something, but you're gonna be able to cross the street. So no matter what you roll, you're not gonna fail. It's just gonna be of like how well you get there, maybe how fast you get
Uh-huh.
there. If you roll really low, maybe you're tripping and like falling or you drop something or whatever, but you are gonna be able to cross the road. Then there's rolls where it'd be like a a dice check sort of thing. So you've got your you have to hit a 20 or you have to hit a 15 on this roll to be able to do the thing, otherwise you're not going to make it. And then there's contested roles where you're trying to do something against somebody else, whether it's an NPC or another PC, and then it's just whoever rolls the highest. So those are the kind of the categories of roles in the system. You have your modifiers that you can then add to your roles. So in Cybertopia, you have a core, which is like kind of the class of the character, but it can really be anything. And that's the whole thing of the system of there's no restrictions. There's nothing saying you have to pick from this specific list. So your core could be soldier, or it could be um, photocopy assistant, or it could be mutant lizard.
Okay.
And I've had people play janitors, I've had people play customer service assistants, all sorts. And some people really like to go in on that kind of vagueness of stuff. And so the core adds is always a +3, and then you can have skills and you can have items, and uh, again they can be anything you like. You could have skill in pouring tea or skill in sharpshooting, and you get like a +1 or a +2 in your skill. And then with items, it's a similar thing. So you could have flak jackets, or you could have mop, or you could have um, a tea set. I don't know why I'm going down the tea route so much, but yeah. So
It's not that time, Ben.
it's like 9:30 for me here in the
Yeah,
evening,
I
so
know.
it's too
Yeah,
late for tea.
yeah.
Um,
Switch it to the morning, and then it's the right time.
but yeah, and then so when you do your roll, when it's something that you need to roll for, you can add whatever modifiers you want. They can stack as much as you like. So depending on what you're trying to do and how you've set up your character, you could have enormous modifier. I've had people roll with like a +13 total before and still manage to fail, because this is the really interesting part of the system of if you roll a nat 1, it's always a failure, but and that one it's also you get a trauma, which is basically you'll get a negative modifier or a penalty that carries forward
Uh-huh.
related to the roll. And the higher the modifier that you used when you rolled that nat one, the worse the outcome it is. So if you've piled absolutely everything you have into this one particular roll that you've really fucked up, you go and do it, and it's utter catastrophe. I had a player once roll with a +10 to try and restrain someone with a taser, and they ended up frying this guy because they got too enthusiastic about it, and they didn't take the guy away peacefully. On the other side of things, if you roll a nat 20, you get a learning towards a new skill. So you have to get 3 nat 20s in a similar thing to get a new skill. So it's quite a slow progressing game in that sense. But you can kind of combine those things. If you roll a nat 20 against a trauma that you have, it immediately turns that trauma into the opposite thing to make it a skill. So I don't know, say you rolled a nat 1 on an observation roll and got blinded. If you then went to roll a nat 20 on a future roll where your blindedness is coming into play, you would get super sight or something, X-ray vision. I don't know. So it can really swing. Like the 5% chance either way makes a huge difference. And I don't know, dice just seem to know when you're playing this system that they love getting nat 1s and nat 20s in this game, man. Like I ran it the other day for the podcast I'm making of it, and there was like 7 crits on that day, and it was wild, and it's so fun, and it just goes all over the place. And because I think players have so much freedom to do whatever they want, and use whatever they want with whatever their character they think can like try, then I think it takes away of that. What I found is with systems like D&D, yeah, they're a lot of fun, but a lot of the time you're wondering, what can I do? What can I use from this sheet that I've got that's telling me what are the things that I can do? Whereas when people are playing Cybertopia, they're like, I want to do this thing. I'm going to see what's on my sheet that I can include, but I'm going to do this thing anyway. Like, they're thinking of the actions first. And that's the whole thing of fiction first or narrative first.
Yeah, definitely. Parallel of old school Renaissance games where like everything is on the sheet, try and work it out.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like I only realized after I'd made the system and got it into the community and stuff of like, oh, this isn't too dissimilar to like Fate or OSR, and like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I guess this is just good game design. If someone else has thought of this thing before I thought of it and completely disconnected from me, yeah, someone else must have good ideas.
Yeah. So it is more of like a sort of lower leveled system, I guess. Like as you said, like you're starting off at like a +3, and the biggest you could get with a lot of modifiers added on is like a +13. Maybe it'd go higher, but something like that. So it's not like Pathfinder or the older editions of D&D where, you know, the numbers got like +40 or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've the podcast I've been running, I'm on like must be about 20 sessions into that now over the last couple of years, and people have like 1 or 2 extra skills. There's no one that's rolling regularly like 30 or something on the D20, so it is a slow progressing system, but I like it that way, in that then you're more pushed into the kind of personality development of the characters rather than the mechanical development.
Mm-hmm. And I think that rapid, like, mechanical development is actually pretty unique to D&D. I don't think many other games actually do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, other ones, like, I guess you can have as rapid a development as you want within the system. Like like you said, you have to roll 3 crits to sort of get something. So if you wanted it to be faster for your game, you could say each one levels you up, right?
Yeah, and that's how I do it in Overgrown. So in Overgrown, you're playing weird animals, and when you roll a nat 20, you evolve a new character, a new animal feature to plug onto your animal, and that goes wild. That's completely out of control, and it is a ridiculous thing, but it very much is a kind of one-shot kind of game, I think, because otherwise you're quickly just going completely bonkers.
I'm thinking of that like using miniatures and then like getting some super glue out to like add stuff on.
I would love that. Like I've always thought it would be amazing to have your little animal creature that you like actually physically have, But yeah, no, it's wild.
Yeah,
But
that
yeah,
is so cool.
overgrown, very different system to Cybertopia in that kind of progression sense. The other side of the progression of it is because you only progress in things that you have rolled on. It's kind of a much more natural thing of like you have to roll nat 20s in the thing to get a skill in it. It's not like in Pathfinder or D&D where you level up and then you get to pick, I will have these things from the options I have.
Yeah, I mean, then the background for those games, it's supposed to be like you're training, like
Hmm.
off screen, kind of.
Yeah,
Like one of the things for D&D was like if you want to be gain a level in Wizard, then it's assumed, or you stated earlier, that you were talking to the party wizard and like get
going to a
like
library or something
notes from
crazy.
them and learning how to cast spells
Mhm.
until you finally take the level.
But in Cybertopia, like you have to be practicing like
Hmm.
in character in the game. Like if you like, you can't really want to progress in observation or something because it will only happen when you get the when you get the nat 20s. So I mean, if you're rolling a lot of observation rolls, then chances are you'll get a few nat 20s eventually. But every roll also has the risk of crit failing. So it balances out in that way.
Yeah, and I think yeah, that's like GURPS does that too. I think where you have to have
Mhm.
used a skill to upgrade it. Well, yeah, let's talk a bit more about the setting for the game. So, Cybertopia is a, like you said, near future, 30 years out, or
Mhm.
that's whenever the
Thereabouts.
cool thing is going to come out. That's 10 years from now, and then we have 20 years of development from there.
Yeah. If this game's still going in 30 years, then oh wow. But also, I'm sure it'll be completely inaccurate.
Yes, yes, but well, I feel like nearly every sci-fi piece always ends up being inaccurate unless your name is Jules Verne.
Yeah,
Um,
like where's my hoverboard? Back to the Future.
right? Yeah, we were supposed to get those like 10 years ago. Um, right. So the setting, you want to give us the quick rundown on that?
Sure. So it is. I think I describe it as a near future, um, cyberpunk-esque world. It's not totally cyberpunk because the base setting is that you play as corporate agents. So that's very much not punk, but it's in the kind of cyber future sort of realms, and uh,
Hmm.
it's like I said earlier, it's not a dark future particularly. The whole idea is that there's this big corporation, Amazing Corp, who are maybe modeled on a famous large online marketplace. That they, the story is that they use their power and their wealth to proliferate climate changing saving technology around the world, and they eventually essentially save the world from climate catastrophe. And because of that, they gained a lot of fame and um, goodwill with the people and power and further wealth, to the point that they became bigger than any government in the world and more trusted than governments who weren't able to save us from the climate um, crisis. And Amazing Corp kind of, they don't take over as such; they just become more and more powerful. And governments still exist, but Amazing Corp is the thing that kind of runs all of the big stuff, particularly like multinational stuff. And so in this world, you play as these corporate agents for Amazing Corp because regardless of how good and kind and lovely a corporation is, there's always going to be some enemies to it. So you play as these agents who go to take out or take care of the problems that Amazing Corp may get itself into. So that can be ex-employees that have gone rogue, or someone that is trying to cause trouble. Maybe there's cyber terrorists or something like that, or black market dealers or gangs that are trying to do stuff that aren't so desirable.
So, like, when you say like sort of corporate agent, usually I'm thinking of like someone in a suit with a briefcase that's going in to like give someone a subpoena or something like that.
That is a possibility, and I have had characters that have done that sort of approach. But yeah, I'm thinking more kind of security agent. I call them agents to kind of avoid the kind of cop parallel.
Well, yeah,
Um,
I was thinking more like sort of a mafia enforcer for how you were describing it.
yeah, that is probably the closest analogy there of like they're the black ops
Hmm.
of the cybersecurity world, and yeah, the missions can be all sorts of things. It could be corporate espionage, it could be recovering stolen intelligence or something like that. And in the book, I've written like 10 starting kind of missions that you might send your characters on. One of them's like stealing something from the back office of a nightclub. Another one is protecting a train from a heist. So there's quite a range, and I put a whole chapter on guidance in the book for like creating your own scenarios, and it's like give the players an overall objective and then figure out some like barriers in the way or what allies or enemies they might encounter and that sort of thing. So it's pretty flexible, and yeah, you could really just let loose. And what I've been doing in the podcast lately is I've opened up the whole world to them and just been like, hey, go and do whatever you want. You're not going on missions anymore. You're deciding what you want to do. And I found that it really works well for that because it doesn't really it doesn't funnel you into a specific thing. You can really use your skills however you like, and you can go and do whatever you want or talk to whoever you want, and you don't have to go down a specific route of like you have to talk to this person and go down this particular railroad, you know.
I think I think part of that's also dependent on your players. Like I feel like some people
Mm.
want to be handed a mission, and some people might also be like more willing to improv or come up with stuff ahead of time and get your input on it and make sure you're good to go with the mission idea.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think that's probably where I've been really blessed with my players because when I started the podcast initially, it was I just did an open casting call and I got like loads of responses, and I guess it's because of the place that I found myself in the scene. Like all of these people, like most of them had experience in doing podcasts or had at least played a lot of RPGs in the past, so we're all pretty comfortable with it. And like I've got some great people, and there's quite a spectrum of their kind of play styles and that, and but like everyone is super comfortable with just going with the flow, which is
mm.
great.
Are these people that you met through the RPG design community?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
a lot
Yeah.
of that. Some of it is just people who I knew through like they'd done actual plays of my friends' games, and so like I knew them as friends of friends sort of thing, and now we're all like proper tight. But, it's a small community, you know. When you get down to the crux of it, you're like, maybe there's like a few thousand people that are regularly contributing to this kind of part of the scene.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I think also like them being used to podcasts makes sense because I think that's
Mm,
sort of this expected thing for the RPG world now that
yeah.
the way to present a system is through a podcast.
Hmm.
You know, and part of it is like integrated marketing, but also part of it is just like showing people how the game is played.
Yeah.
And you can do that with a podcast or like a short YouTube thing or a comic. I think I've seen some books do that.
I've always wanted to get a comic done. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they're super helpful. Like you can just
Mm.
go through a play session. I know plenty of books do the like sort of here's how combat works, and we're gonna like do dialogue and scene setting with the players and all of that.
I think particularly with a cyberpunk theme as well, like that would work so well.
Yeah, no, it's good. And I just learn well from comics myself, anyways. So
Okay.
yeah, I like them a lot. That's how I learned history and chemistry and biology was from reading different
Oh, that's
comic
awesome. I
versions of
wish
all
I
that
had
stuff.
that sort of thing when I was younger.
Yeah, it's good. Um, Helped me pass physics. Um, so for the setting, so you described it as like Amazing Corp is becoming like this huge thing that is
Mm.
rivals governments for power.
Yeah.
Um, and I was interested in the dynamic there between like corporation, government, and also sort of like worker slash consumer power, like unions and that kind of
Mhm.
focus within what's going on. Is that something that you imagined in place, or is that more like up to the group that's running the system?
Um, I definitely put some sort of like that balance in there, and I think particularly in the governments versus corporation side,
Mhm.
I kind of looked at the way that a lot of governments, particularly in the West these days, uh, do just acquiesce certain aspects of themselves to the private sector. So, like the private health insurance and the NHS in the UK and that sort of thing. Um, Governments are just happy to hand over things that they don't want to be involved in to private enterprise. And so I can imagine like Amazing Corp goes and does this amazing stuff with the climate technology. Governments would be like, okay, yeah, you can be in charge of the environment now. Oh, we don't want to be involved in it because we keep on
I
screwing it up.
I did a presentation last week on that at my work, actually.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
Yes, I was told to remove a piece about how, and yes, the people that run this part of the government are the lowest bidding contractors.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I kind of see that could be a natural way that this stuff could go. And that was the thinking behind everything of the setting of like, what is a way that you could actually imagine the world going? But like not some like hundreds of years in the future thing where like literally anything could have gone on. This is like if you extrapolate from where we are now, sensibly where could we be in 30 years time? And that's also like I put a bunch of restrictions on where I think technology could potentially be. But also from a balancing point of view, I was like, please no teleporting. Maybe we keep flying to a minimum. No intangibility or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
there's that. From the kind of union and workers perspective, I think there's definitely an interesting dynamic to be explored there that I haven't yet gone into with any of my campaigns on using the system. And I think that's because it scares me a little bit of thinking, trying to. I think there's a sensitivity, particularly in that area of worker power and unionization and stuff. And I think, especially with like Amazon being very union busting and stuff these
Uh-huh.
days, uh, there's a line to tread there. So uh, I
Yeah.
think there's certainly I think that would be one of the groups that would be kind of the people that you as corporate agents might get set up against to like take down this union that's causing us trouble. But that's probably for myself personally a step too far into like the cop side of corporate agents.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that's something I hadn't considered necessarily because I've always been in jobs that have had like a pretty strong union presence or
Mm-hmm.
something close approximating that. And yeah, I could see how that would be more of too close to home for people that don't have that type of protection.
Yeah.
Well, in that sort of like union representation, this is a segue that will work great. Um, I also saw in your survey that you encourage more of like a player-made approach to designing the world. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it seemed similar to like how Dungeon World does it, where like you sort of put a map in front of them and then they can fill in other pieces of the map. Maybe not quite like a
Yes.
physical map, but like that idea. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that you actually made your own system for doing that. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I finished season 1 of the podcast like I think it was just before Christmas last year, and we've just only recently started recording season 2. But in the in between bit, um, I did cast interviews for everyone. I've got a cast of 15, so I did cast interviews of everyone, and that was brilliant. And I got input from everyone on what they wanted to see in the world and what they wanted to their characters to experience and that sort of thing. But also, we've played this city and faction world building game that I made myself. It's based on the Beak, Feather, and Bone system, which is kind of they call it a map labeling game, and it's really great fun. I played it a few times. Basically, you get given a map and you draw cards from a deck of cards to determine like what building you're gonna get. So you pull like a 5 of hearts or something, and then you decide on the map what building am I going to select from this map of this city, and then you color it in and you write a little blurb about what that building is. So I basically took that and hacked it to be a more kind of cyberpunky kind of system, sci-fi sort of thing, and used that with I think went through like 3 sessions with my players, and we had I don't know like 11 different factions, just filling in this map of this city and having players determine what is their faction and what effect it has on the world, what are they doing, what buildings they own. And when you draw face cards, you get to make up an NPC. So we've now got a whole bunch of NPCs that I can use in season 2.
Oh, that's cool.
And the players have come up with such amazing ideas. And like, depending on what number on the card is, like that's how much kind of importance the building has in the world. And some of my players just have such a great knack of turning around a bad thing. So one of my players had made like this made this faction that was about like redeveloping buildings. So they'd come in, they'd knock a building down and build a new one. And he just kept on drawing like aces and twos, so like really low value cards, but every time it'd make it into some horrific thing that like it was really bad for his faction because it was a low value card, but it was like had a massive impact on the world. And the way that some people can just I don't know, it's that whole like kind of failing forward kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Just seeing that played out into this map building game was brilliant. So yeah, we're using this map now basically in season 2 to like let them loose on the world, and some of them are being like pointing the parties towards, I know this building from this faction, we should go and visit them. And that's really great to just let them loose and say, hey, where do you want to go? And they can bring in the things that they created or that somebody else created in those city building games, and they're taking the reins, and it makes it super easy for me. I'm just like, yeah, we're going to go to the place that you described previously, so you can tell us all about it.
Yes.
Which is a big change, because in season 1, we were doing the 10 missions from the book that I'd written. So they're all very contained. It's like you get sent to this specific area and you got to go and do this specific thing in this building. Like you got to get into the back room of the nightclub to steal the data or whatever. Whereas now they're like, you're on the streets, go where you want.
Yeah, I also have enjoyed the parts where I can say, yeah, tell us about what that's like, and then I sit back and I don't have to improv. I can just let them handle it. So you said you have 15 players, and I know from your survey that they're sort of split into multiple groups. Did you all come together for that creation process?
So we did it in still in separate groups, but like so we did the first session. I think I had 5 players in the map building game, and then the second and third session there was 3 players in each of those. So, but I kept the like what had been done on the map in the first session, in the second session, and in the third session. So they were building on what had been previously done, and they knew like what the factions were that were previously created and stuff. So it was a iterative process. Yeah.
Okay. Did you bring it back to like the first and the second group so they could like see the previous things and kind of adapt what they designed to be more in tune with that?
I didn't, but that is a good idea. Yeah, we're getting to the point now where it's getting increasingly complex, and something that I've realized that I should really do, and I don't know, I need someone with technical expertise in this area, because what would be great would be to have an interactive map that people could like click on the things to see, oh, what was this building. Instead I've got like a legend that is like, I don't know, 90 buildings or something that people have to scroll through to figure out what is this pink one in the middle here, or what is this green one over there. But that would be handy.
I know the program for that. I don't know how to use it very well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that type of programming is very difficult. A lot of I know that websites can handle that, but a lot of them just choose not to because it's so complicated. And then like
I did a similar project when I was in high school, but this was like 25 years ago, so
yeah. I wish there was like an easy online tool for designing maps like that. They're so useful.
There probably isn't. There's probably like maybe someone is watching this and screaming at the screen, be like, "Go use this!" But we're never going to hear from them.
Well, I'd like to hear from them if they have any ideas.
Yes, please, if you have this thought, if you know what this is, please tell us.
Yes. Join the Discord. Come and tell us. Right. So you mentioned like the technology and like wanting to set limits on that, which are rational limits. Like, yeah, teleportation really changes the way that people approach like the economy and travel, of course, and that wanting to have like physical barriers in place helps a lot with designing challenges so people can't just like pop past them.
Yeah.
And flight also, because similarly, like without flight, offense is a barrier. With flight, offense means nothing.
Yeah.
So I get that, but there's still lots of like, because you have like you described in your survey that there's like tons of biological and cyborg modifications that are like sort of ubiquitous, and no one thinks anything if they walk by someone with like a shark for a head or something.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, that's just a guy that has a shark for a head.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to, and I didn't want to, I don't know, I didn't want to gloss over this sort of like societal struggles and stuff, but I tried to write out of history, future history, whatever the word for that is. Like I tried to write out stuff like, like bigotry and racism, homophobia, transphobia, that sort of stuff, and I'm just like, look, everyone, there's such a huge spectrum in what you will see in the world now. Like you can see people with robot parts or people with animal parts. That's so common that people are just used to everybody being so different that there's no prejudices anymore because there's no like single groups.
Yeah. If everyone is so different, then
it's the Incredibles thing. If everyone's special, then no one is, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that's the bad way of putting it, but yes. That's a villain statement. You can't use that for a positive, like, egalitarian society. That's not right.
That's all right. I'm the BBEG.
Yeah.
And I think, actually, you made a good point there without realizing, I think, of the whole Amazing Corp thing is that they are the big bad corporation, but they are also the big good corporation. And a key thing of the whole of the Cybertopia setting is grey. Everything is a shade of grey. There is no like definite evil and there is no definite good, and you will do stuff that is good for bad reasons and you'll do stuff that is bad for good reasons and stuff like that. So I think I have a prologue to the game of like, look, don't look for the black and white in this. It's all grey.
Yeah. Like from what you've described, this sounds like it's like a great society that's on its way to like, the Star Trek utopia kind of world that we see in the later
maybe.
Star Trek seasons.
And I mean, even Star Trek has its conflicts and stuff. So
yeah.
Nothing's quite perfect,
Yeah. Well, I guess my point there is that the Starfleet is supposed to be like, post-racism and post-scarcity. I guess they didn't really challenge like sexuality as a component as much, just because it was
an error,
a problem for later generations from when the show was coming out. But maybe the newer seasons are dealing with that. I don't know. I'm not watching it now.
Yeah, it's been a long time for me too.
Yeah. Well, I guess sort of aligned with that. I feel like in a lot of like big changes like this, like religion also changes along with it. So how is that fitting within the setting space?
So there is, I wrote a festive special into the book as well. So there's a festive mission. And I do delve into a little bit of the religious aspects of, because science became so important and ubiquitous to the world, the religions kind of fell away even more so than they are now. Like the downfall of religious power.
Well, I feel like a lot of religions are against like body modification. I mean, it's more specifically like piercings and tattoos for how we think of it, but like, having cybernetic modifications and like animal parts is definitely would fall into, disrespecting God's
especially when you're getting
creation.
into the gene splicing and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So in that mission, I kind of specify, look, religion is all kind of what is left of religion has just kind of merged into a general religion that isn't like strongly followed really. It's just almost part of history. So when people look at like the traditions from the past, they go and will get mixed together, and they're not really kept track of anymore. People don't really follow things religiously, but there are still like cults and stuff that follow maybe like newer age stuff, or I don't know. There's probably some hive mind cult or something like that somewhere in the world. But in terms of like the prevailing religions of today, Islam and Christianity and Judaism and that sort of stuff, like they're all very much faded in this 3 decades into the future thing, which I think is probably an unrealistic example.
Yeah, I would think that like there'd be more modification. Like we've had other like large changes in our society that like religion has adapted and altered the way that it expresses itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think Mormonism in the United States is a good example of that. We're like trying to adapt Christianity to understand like 2 new continents that weren't exposed to it.
Uh-huh.
And trying to have that in a sensical explanation
Mm-hmm.
within religious like miracle framework for how much sense miracles make. If they made sense,
Yeah.
they wouldn't be miracles, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I guess I'm agreeing there that the 30 years is not enough for religion to just be like, oh, that's something from the past.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I imagine there's probably like at least still pockets of religion in this world, but it's not something that I've delved into in any further detail than a kind of a passing mention in the festive special.
yeah, and I think you touched on something there as well. Is that like there's also something that's sort of like a secular religion
Mm-hmm.
that and the Western world is somewhat aligned on this. Of like we have Halloween where we all dress up and get candy. We have different days where we go and meet up with our family to hang out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what it is in the UK, but we have Thanksgiving in November here for that.
Yeah, we don't have any equivalent of that. Yeah, and it's a good point because
Boxing Day, kind of. I mean, it's not quite the same
yeah.
thing, but we don't really do that here.
Yeah. No, so the festive special is called Festmas because it is the amalgamation of all of the kind of the things that occur in so many religions around that time of year.
Yeah, I thought you might have been referencing
Yeah.
the Seinfeld thing with that. Do you know that?
Oh, I'm not a Seinfeld person. It didn't really make it that big in the UK.
Okay. There's one of the characters, like his dad hates Christmas or
Oh, right.
something like that, so he makes up his own like winter holiday called Festivus. That is more pagan in tone, but then they always celebrate Festivus, and he's like the character is so angry at his dad that he never gets to celebrate Christmas with him.
So the whole thing with Festmas is that Amazing Corp kind of, I guess, took over representation of the festive season, and they send out as gifts to all of the underperforming children digital assistants to help them perform better in following years. Children. Yeah.
You better be good or Amazing will send you a robot.
Yeah, a robot to help you be better. It's not a punishment. It's assistance.
I know.
And they're definitely not spying on you.
There's such care that this corporation has, like actually like trying to build a better world, but still like maintain control and like corporation stuff. But
shades of grey.
Yeah. Well, anyways, where I was going with that before is that like there's these secular religions that exist, and it feels like those exist independently of religions. Mm-hmm. Like there's plenty of Jewish people that celebrate Christmas, not like going to mass or anything, but just like giving presents with each other and bringing a Christmas tree and decorating it and that kind of thing.
Yeah, the commercial religions.
Yeah. I think Christmas is celebrated in Japan now, which has no tradition associated with it.
You just can't avoid things like this. They're just so ingrained into, I guess, especially Western culture, that it's then colonized into other cultures as well. Like
Hollywood is exporting so much culture around the world that it just kind of leaks in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think Halloween, I'm not I'm not sure where that originated, but it feels like that has gone way beyond like it just being where it was originally.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I know it was a Catholic holiday originally, but now there's like the secular presentation of kids dressing up in costumes and going and getting candy has nothing to do with
Oh yeah.
All Hallows Eve at all.
Hmm.
Another thing I was curious about for the world related to technology was the sort of the cyberspace element that comes with some cyberpunk things,
Hmm.
where like you have the real world and then you have cyberspace, which is some sort of like 3D
Yeah.
virtual representation where you have like your avatar and then you can sort of have like avatar fights or something compared to, our version of the internet that is much more grounded. Like right now I'm in my office talking to you and I can
Yeah.
see your picture, but it's not like we're in some sort of virtual reality cafe where I'm talking to you. You know what
Uh,
I mean?
yeah, yeah. We're not in a 3D space with like avatar representation and stuff. I guess
Yeah.
like we could be doing that if we were both in VR headsets and that sort
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah, if we both wanted to spend the money
Yeah.
to set that up and bother to have the conversation that way, of course.
Mhm.
Um, but my question there is like, what's your visualization for that, or is that kind of left up to the group for how that works?
I think it's something that we've struggled a little bit to define. And like even though it's in like 30 years into the future, everyone still kind of has phones and there's the internet still exists and things like search engines still exist just because I think it's probably a limitation of us players and GMs to think of a world where those things don't exist.
Well, phones
Um,
is interesting. Like, I'm assuming that there would be like everyone just has a cybernetic modification that acts as a phone.
yeah, like in their head or something, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Um, but I think people just the idea of having a device that I don't know that you'd pass around or whatever, or like a physical thing that you'd hold, maybe not in the same form that it is now.
Hmm.
Uh, that's a difficult thing to let go of in your head, like when you're trying to think of like things to do in the world and that. Um, so yeah, like phones still exist, and we've had situations where someone's had like the latest model of phone, and like the kids on the block have been like, "Oh my god, I've not seen that. That's like 5 generations ahead of us or something."
The
Um,
iPhone 35. Wow.
but yeah, there's virtual spaces. I've created a kind of social media called Headspace, where people like upload their videos. It's probably like an amalgamation of like TikTok and Facebook and all that sort of stuff.
Uh-huh.
Um, and but like the web kind of still exists in its kind of format of it. There are kind of pages of information that you can access, and like um, you could bring up a browser screen on a hologram screen or something. Um, uh, you could also just plug in and like surf the web on your brain and without anyone seeing like the visual representation.
Oh.
So we haven't done anything like in the virtual space. I suppose that would be a possibility in future if anybody wants to try and go down that route, but it's not something that we've delved into yet. I think everyone's kind of focused on the physical world
Mhm.
of Cybertopia at the moment.
I mean, that was one of the reasons I was asking that in some other cyberpunk games, the virtual world ends up being sort of this separate, almost like a separate character sheet that you have to have for it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
you can kind of have a character that's focused on the virtual world or one that's focused on the real world. And it can kind
hmm
of end up being like, oh, this is a virtual world adventure, so I can't do anything. Or this is a real world adventure, so I can't do anything. Like that
yeah.
kind of split for how your character is designed and focused.
hmm
So I guess it's actually good that you're sort of avoiding that problem.
It does open a whole other can of worms, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I was curious for like the cultural changes and like technology changes that we're describing. Like those are from what you've said so far, those are like ubiquitous, maybe with like a few places that are, not going along with the rest of the world, like North Korea, the little hermit kingdom kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is that your vision for it too?
Yeah, I guess so. Um, it's not something that's come up, but there'll definitely be, I don't know, purists or something like that. Like I said, I try to avoid the kind of cliches of analogies to racism and stuff because I don't want to end up in like an X-Men mutant sort of situation.
Hmm.
Um, but there's definitely going to be people like it's only 30 years in the future. There's still going to be bigots from now who exist in 30 years time. So we're not going to be completely devoid of that, and I'm sure there's going to be some people that will have formed into groups of like this neighborhood's just for the non-mutant people, or this neighborhood's just for people who aren't augmented or have robot parts and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Something that so in the faction game, one of the players came up with this really fun thing that I enjoyed of a faction that is it's kind of run by humans, but it's for robots, and their whole idea is that the only way that we can create a level playing field with the robots that are taking all the human jobs is to make sure that the robots also have the same rights as humans and like minimum wage and time off and all that sort of stuff. So if the robots are given the same rights as the humans, then they can no longer be better than the humans.
Hmm.
It's an interesting
I
one.
can believe someone having that point of view. It feels like the kind of thing it's like, and thus the apocalypse started kind of
Yeah.
story. But all right, yeah, no, I dig it. Well, yeah, was there anything else you wanted to say about the setting? I wanted to get into like your podcast with the different groups and that kind of thing next.
I just try to keep it as flexible as possible. And like, if someone when we're playing just comes up with some random idea, then I usually will just be like, yeah, sure, we can do that. So in season one, like before we did the whole world building game, I did a single session where we went into a neighborhood and I just said to the players like, okay, we're going to go into a like an eatery of some kind. I want you to describe to me what this eatery is like. And they came up with a 90s themed retro bar, and then there was a bowling alley that they came up with that doesn't do bowling because bowling is now just virtual, or like holographic and stuff. It was like this whole rundown neighborhood, and they invented hover hockey, which is a bit like street hockey, but you have like sneakers that shoot air out the bottom of them.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, so
No, it's like air hockey. Okay.
yeah, so yeah, whenever the players come up with some wacky idea of like, oh, I want to see this and what, I'm just like, yeah, sure, that sounds grand.
Okay. So they're kind of building the culture themselves.
Hmm.
That's cool.
And they have amazing ideas.
And are they presenting these things as if they're commonplace or more like a counterculture example?
A bit of both.
Okay. Yeah, it depends on the example.
Yeah.
All right, that's sweet. Well, yeah, let's talk about like you have an actual play podcast with 4 different groups, is that right?
Well, it's kind of 4 different groups. I will only play with like between 3 and 5 players in any one session. Like more than that just gets out of hand. And I've known people that have
Uh-huh.
tried, and that is very difficult, especially on a podcast format. But so I do sessions of like 3 or 4 players at a time. But in the first season, those groups changed every single session. So there's no session where it was the same exact group as before. So the idea is that you're these corporate agents, and each mission you get sent out on, you get sent out with a different group.
Okay.
So there was like loads of people got to play with loads of different players from the other groups, and as much as there was 4 kind of groups, the next 4 sessions were 4 different groups
Okay.
within that mix.
So it was more like a West Marches style where like it
Yes,
was
exactly.
swapped out.
And
Okay.
another thing that I didn't know existed when I started doing this all, and then I found out, oh no, that's exactly how I play this then.
I feel like that happens all the time. People like have a large group and then end up doing it that way and then get told, "Oh, it's West Marches." And they're like, "Oh, sure, yeah, it looks like it is."
Yeah, and I mean the way that came about was because when I was originally playtesting this with my friends from work and stuff, because I'd just do a shout out, it would be a different group that I'd have every time, and sometimes it was people who had played before and had played together and stuff, and sometimes it wasn't, and so that just kind of became the way that the game was played, just by happenstance.
And I'm assuming that you like it that way because you keep doing it.
Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, I know people who are playing the game and they are using just the same group of 4 every time. So,
Uh,
yeah. And it doesn't have to be a group of 4. That just seems to be a good number.
what made you want to do an actual play that way instead of more just like was this like your playtest group initially, or?
No, no. So I shopped around a bit trying to find people who would do an actual play of it because I figured having an actual play would be really good marketing material.
Mhm.
And it's an indie system that no one's ever heard of, so no one wanted to really do a whole campaign of it. I could get people to do like one shots or something, but in terms of running a whole campaign, that wasn't going to happen. So eventually, I just said, "Oh, okay, screw it. I'll give it a shot myself and see if I can run an actual play." And I'd never done a podcast before. I'd done some, I'd been on some podcasts and I'd been on some streams, but I'd never run a production like that before. So
Mhm.
that was a daunting experience, and I shopped around. I asked a lot of people like for advice, and everyone said, "Ben, don't do everything yourself," and I promptly ignored that advice. And yeah, but I think the reason I ended up with 15 players, actually, I was originally thinking I'd just get 4 players who I'd run through all of the missions and stuff. Uh, was that I got too many responses to the open casting call and I
Uh-huh.
couldn't decide who to pick. So I was just like, fuck it, I'll take you all. And it worked out. And I really like the way it's worked out because it's given everyone such flexibility, and um, we we don't have like a regular schedule. It's not like we will play every week on this day at this time. I just put a shout out into the Discord group that we've got and be like, hey, who's available on this date and wants to play in this particular mission, and we'll get a show of hands and I'll grab people in. And that has worked out so far. In season 2, the groups are, I've gone for a more kind of structured thing of I'd like players to stay in the same group for a bit longer so they can develop those kind of personal bonds and stuff between the characters a bit more.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And that's going well, but we're a couple of sessions in and people are already splitting their parties and joining up and merging with other groups. So it's just kind of naturally going back into the way that we did it before of, yeah, you're going to mix up anyway.
Okay. Well, if that's what they want and it's not a big problem for you, I guess it's all right.
It will remain to be seen. It's starting to get already quite complicated, and I will deal with it because that's the way I've set this up, and we'll figure it out as we go, just like we do everything else.
I feel like for other groups I've heard that do this, they have like a historian that kind of tracks this shit for them.
Oh man, that would be handy.
Or at least like telling the players, okay, you're writing a summary of this session, put it here.
I think it's one of the advantages of it being a podcast because it's recorded, and I go back and like I'm editing all this stuff because I am a madman, and I've listened to all of the sessions so many times while I'm doing the editing that I do know them fairly inside out. There's still occasionally someone will come bring something out to me that's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that, even though I've edited it like 5 times.
Yes. And I wasn't just necessarily meaning you, I meant also like the other players. Like I'm sure some of
Mm-hmm.
them are listening to the podcast and can pick
Mm-hmm.
up the info that happened in sessions that they weren't there for. That's relevant, but I'm also sure that some of them don't want to listen to it, and might
Yeah.
do better with a summary where they can just pick something up that way.
Well, actually, I really like that some players don't know some of the stuff that happens in other sessions because then that comes through when they're playing as their character of like
Uh-huh.
the character doesn't know because the player doesn't know, and then you have fun interactions of the players explaining stuff to each other of, oh no, I know this from when I did that particular faction, or I know this from the mission that I was in previously, and we should go and see this doctor that we saw before that you don't know about. And the like you don't have to have that kind of I guess it's the lack of meta knowledge.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like I think it really helps the RP just feel natural when people are having those sorts of conversations.
Yeah, yeah, there is an element of that. Like I think I had a case of that where there was a conversation that was happening in a session that my character was not there for, so I just was like, hey, you know what? You guys keep talking. I'm gonna go get a snack. Came back and they were done, and then
Mhm.
like 2 sessions later, they referenced that conversation, and I was like, what are you talking about? I had no idea because I wasn't there, and my character
Yeah.
wasn't there either. So yeah, that did feel like a more like authentic interaction. It was
Mm.
cool having it. So what was the plot for season one, I guess? If you want to share that.
Okay, so season one, everyone is a corporate agent, and they're rookies when they start out, and they go out on their first mission, and each of them has a different mission, whether it's like robbing the nightclub or saving the train. Um, and the missions get progressively more aggressive. So, like in the kind of second half of the season, they're clearing out a drug gang that has taken over a pharmaceutical factory, so that Amazing Corp can then take over the pharmaceutical factory.
Okay.
Um, or there's a tower block where someone's brain augmentation or something has gone wrong and has been giving everyone hallucinations and stuff. So you've got to go and try and sort that out. And things just kind of escalate from mission to mission. And then in the final mission of the season, I got all of the four groups to come together, and it was recorded separately, but when I actually put it together, when I edited it together, I spliced it all together so it sounded like they were all kind of in the same session. So
Uh,
um, we had them all approaching the same building, the same location, but taking different aspects of it. So they were going to like this meeting between three of the big anti-Amazing Corp factions to take out the leadership of this meeting. And so one team went in the ground and kind of distracted the entourages that were like the security teams for these factions. Another team went on the roof and put down a jamming device so that they couldn't get any communications out when the attack went down. And another team went through the sewers to place explosives underneath the building as like a fail-safe sort of thing. And then the final team smashed through the roof with this giant mech and attacked the leadership that was having a meeting like in the top floor of the building. And so all these four teams taking on different sides of the mission together, but with a common goal. And at the end of it, they've killed the leadership. They've successfully kind of contained all of the entourages in this building. They're all just about to leave, and then the bombs blow them up. Everyone, even the agents. So Amazing Corp has thrown them under the bus, disposed of them because maybe they know too much or something. That will be explored in season 2, but essentially Amazing Corp has done away with these agents and used them to take out some of their biggest enemies.
ooh, okay.
And in season 2, the whole idea is that they have somehow survived this, and they're going to go out into the world and decide what they want to do, if they're going to get revenge on Amazing Corp or if they're going to just try and go out into the world and survive. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's really interesting seeing the different player reactions and the different character reactions, because some of these characters were really heavily like pro Amazing Corp before. They were like, I love Amazing Corp. They gave me this job. They gave me these augments. They've given me like all of the things that I've gained from life. Other players have, some of those players are being like now, well, I want to rejoin Amazing Corp. I want to find my way back into their good graces and stuff. Whereas the others, some of them were like, well, I only had that job because it was the only job I could get. They screwed me over. Now I'm going to go and screw them back. And that's really interesting dynamics in the player groups now.
That's quite a job to be the only one that you can get.
Well, Amazing Corp runs so much in the world now, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They're a mega corporation.
So for that first season, was that using just the 10 example missions that you have in the book, or were you expanding
Yeah,
beyond that?
it was loosely structured around those 10 missions. There were some changes from exactly what was in the book, because I mean, you're never running anything exactly from the book,
Yeah, of course not.
regardless of how detailed it is. But yeah, essentially that was those 10 missions. Yep.
And was that last one like a 11th mission past that?
Yeah, so the last one is, there is a mission like that in the book, but it's designed for just 4 players to do as one group. So I had to vastly expand it to make it a 4-group mission that all comes together.
Okay.
So yeah. I tell you what, editing that was
Yeah, that
that was
sounds
hard work.
like an actual editing job.
It really came together well though. Like I think it. I'm very proud of how that came out in the end.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it was
for
like
sure.
I spaced it out over 4 episodes, but like each episode was multi parts of each group. So yeah, putting the chronology I think together was the hardest part of figuring out. Okay, this group did this at this point, and this group was doing the same thing at a different point or in a different place at the same time, but that affected what happened in that group.
Yeah, I would think just the context switching, like listening to that would also be difficult.
I tried to make it like decent sized chunks. So it's
Yeah,
not like you're going from one group every minute. Like you'd get like 15 minutes of one group and then 15 minutes of another group.
yeah, that's good. Oh yeah, well here's an obvious question. So where is this taking place? Like all of this stuff. Like I know it's like the
Yeah.
future, but like are we talking London? Are we talking New York or Beijing?
We are vague about it.
Okay.
We have, and I don't think the name of the city's ever been mentioned on the podcast actually. But it's a fictional city called Paradigm City that one of the players named actually. Um, but we haven't actually defined if it's like America or the UK or somewhere. In my head canon, it's kind of a probably a New England kind of city um, on the coast, but yeah, it's not explicitly stated anywhere.
Okay. There is like this new developed city that's being built in California or in designed phase right now where they're trying to
Right.
make it be like this sort of carbon neutral city from the start and
Oh
how it's
yeah.
constructed. So trying to have like a rational train or bus system,
hmm
uh, all of that.
I think in terms of culture, it's quite Americanized, but like I can only really do um, English and American accents vaguely well, so it's an American English amalgamation.
Okay, yeah, maybe French.
Maybe.
But yeah, was there anything else you wanted to share about the campaign or the podcast, the setting, the rules?
um, no, not really. Like 15 players sounds like a lot, but like having that flexibility really helps. I think you shouldn't be afraid to have lots of players because it just gives you so many angles to play with.
Well, I think also for like a fantasy first system, it is easier because you don't have to necessarily like design a simulationist challenge that would work with a large group like that.
Yeah.
You can be more focused on what's good for the story here instead of how do I appropriately challenge 15 three level party members without
Mhm.
killing two of them during the combat or something like that.
Yeah. I'd also say as well, like I think the style that like rules like games really work for actual plays, and I'm surprised there aren't more. Like I get it, like D&D is the big game in the scene, and so a lot of people know it, and a lot of people will just understand what's going on in an actual play of it. But there's there's so much that you can just have, and it's almost like a drama rather than an actual play. Like it's a radio drama
Uh-huh.
with dice, and it can make so much fun.
Yes, exactly. And it's much easier to like edit around for that type of podcast as well. I've talked with other people about this where for a D&D podcast, since so much of the session can turn into like, rolling for combat kind of stuff,
hmm
and that can kind of take people away from the fiction when you are like I got an 11 plus 8, that's a 19. Does that hit? Let me check the
Yeah,
AC. Yes, it
and
does.
reading through the rules and the stat blocks and
Uh-huh.
stuff, and it slows things down so much.
Yeah, compared to like a fantasy first system where like, you're just you roll and you sort of as a like for a lot of them you already know like what you got if it succeeds or not when you look at the
hmm
roll. You don't have to compare it to
Yeah,
some difficulty class thing. So you can just skip straight to the narration for like what happened and what you're doing.
yeah,
Um, so yes, there's a lot less you have to edit out as a podcast editor when you're working with that.
And it's one of the things that I look forward to, hopefully, like as the space diversifies away from D&D. I want to hear more of these indie systems, and I want to hear more of the rules light systems being actual played.
Yeah. Oh, I like them too. Well, is there any advice you want to give for other GMs before we wrap up?
Let your players come up with ideas. Let your players make stuff up and just go with it. Because man, players are weird. They have weird ideas, and some of them are amazing. So just go with that.
All right, cool. Well, thanks, Ben. It was good having you here, and I liked learning about Cybertopia. And yeah, if anyone else is interested, we're gonna have a link to the shop to take a look for yourself in the episode notes.
Cool. Thank you very much for having me on. This was great chatting. Go and listen to Cybertopia on any of your podcast platforms, or catch it on YouTube.
Yeah, there'll be a link too.
Yeah, season 2 will be coming out from December, so really excited for you to all hear that because it's wild.
All right, cool. Thanks, Ben.
Cheers.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed listening to Ben tell us about Cybertopia. If you'd like to check out the game, it's available on Ben's shop on itch.io. There's a link to his shop in the episode description. And if you or a friend that you know would like to be on the show, there's also a link to fill out a survey and get on the show in the episode description as well. Thanks for listening.